let's look at the New Zealand dollar versus the US dollar. First off, read this disclaimer carefully. Like, sub, share, and comment. And this is what's been happening in the other markets today. S&P 500 is pretty flat. We will look at Forex in this video. Here you can see the pair. It is right here, 26% from the lows and pretty close to the 52-week highs. Okay, if we will look at the seasonality, we do see that December, which is right around the corner, it is one of the strongest months for the New Zealand dollar. That's interesting. And this is based on all the years between 2001 and 2020. So basically quite a few years. And even if we go further back to 1991, we then see that December is, it is a very strong month. So that's interesting. So the seasonality is certainly in favor here of the bulls. Okay, so this is the super big picture. Weekly data points, and we go way back here. So you can see that it certainly has been moving in some huge cycle patterns. Big rise in phase, big decline. Huge rise, decline. One of the first things that jumps at me is that the cycles have gone from being very clean. I mean, this is a very easy long and easy short to become a bit messier in this major cycle pattern. And in this major pattern, it's become, well, we do have a clear cycle, but it is much more messy. Here it is more orderly. And the recent development here, it's we have a very short rising phase and then a very protracted decline. So there certainly has been a change here in the cycles. If we zoom in a bit, then we do see a very interesting familiar pattern. And that is the inverse head and shoulders pattern. So the inverse head and shoulders pattern, it works like this. You have a shoulder, a head, and you have a shoulder. And that's what's been happening right here. We do have this head which also formed a double bottom. It's a very bullish double bottom in that the right part of the bottom, double bottom, it is higher than the left one. And you have a very shallow right shoulder, which is a bullish sign. So yeah, this is a very bullish inverse head and shoulders pattern, and these are weekly data points. So if we actually measure how long it took for it to develop, if we measure from here to here, that's 497 days. So that's a long time. And this is still, relatively early in the completion of that pattern. So, which suggests that there is more upside. We can see further that we have broken out above this red 200-week moving average. And the 200-week has been important in the past as a support level and recently as a resistance level. And this is a very solid break above it. And you can see last week we went down to test it and rallied from it, turning it at least temporarily into a support level. We should be a bit cautious. There have been some failed breakouts in the past, but this one is the strongest, it is the strongest breakout. Especially looking at the consistency. This is very interesting. Further, you do have the 50-week moving average in green turning, well, it is positive, and if we do get a golden cross on the weeklies in the future, that would of course be very bullish. If we look here at the daily data points, let's do it like that. Zoom out to get a bunch of data. So here you can see the inverse head and shoulders pattern in much more detail. So we went down here, tested the blue 100-day moving average, test, and then we just go right up. We have a golden cross here, but arguably the moving averages have been thrown a bit all over the place. But we do have a clear breakout, so this is nice. This is what we want to see. based on, a bullish thesis. Of course, if you are a bear, then you want to see something else. Okay, so I think that based on the data we have, especially taking into account also the seasonality, which was very, very strong for December, I find it easier to make a bullish thesis for the New Zealand dollar than a bearish one. And there are also some other data, well, other kinds of information that we need to take into account, because the forex market, of course, it is the most liquid market, and it is impacted by all kinds of different factors. And the political situation in the United States, it is still a bit undecided. The thing is that, yes, the consensus is that Biden won. At least it is the consensus among the majority of the U.S. population and also the mainstream media. The issue is that Trump has no plans of conceding, and there are a bunch of legal cases in development. So it is, and this is 2020. Yeah, it is something I have said before. This is a year that it has quite a track record at this point. So if there was to be any year in which some major election in such an important country experiences some major upheaval, then it would be the United States. If there were to be that upset, that would be bearish for the US dollar and further fuel the New Zealand dollar more. Let's say that Trump concedes, like officially. There is the concern that Trump is going to go on a bit of a vendetta until he leaves office. There's concerns about him declassifying a bunch of material. I mean, he does have the right to declassify stuff, but the other politicians, U.S. presidents have been more, establishment candidates, and they sort of know the informal rules of the game. Trump, he doesn't care, so he might release stuff that, of course, it would be good for the world to know the truth about certain things, but maybe certain truths would be very bearish for America. There's also some concerns that he will pardon some controversial figures like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, and also Chelsea Manning. Many people, of course, will like that if he does something like that, view it as something that it's very pro-journalism in a sense, and he has been very much ranting and raving about, fake news and the fake media. Hence, it would be in line with his persona to actually pardon highly controversial people in the journalists. Well, I mean, technically they weren't journalists, but they could be categorized in that realm. So basically, a lot of very interesting things could happen that could further strengthen a bullish thesis for the New Zealand dollar. Okay, whatever you do, of course, be very careful in this market. It is very wild, and maybe the entire decade is going to be wild going forward.